Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online, news that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Anthony Moreno. On the program today, we'll discuss public transportation in our region. But first, a look at child well-being in New Mexico. The Annie E. Casey Foundation's KIDS COUNT Databook on child well-being has been released for 2023. Here to discuss where New Mexico stands is Emily Wildow, Senior Research and Policy Analyst for New Mexico Voices for Children and KIDS COUNT Coordinator. Emily, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Of course, thank you for having me today.
Can we start off with just an understanding of what the report looks at?
Yes, absolutely. So there are two reports that happen every year. There's the National KIDS COUNT Databook that comes out every summer. That's the one that issues the rankings comparing New Mexico to other states. And then at the beginning of the year, with every legislative session, New Mexico Voices releases the New Mexico KIDS COUNT Databook. So that repeats some of the data from the National Databook, but it really dives much more deeply into what's going on in our counties, our school districts. We disaggregate the data as much as possible by race and ethnicity to see where there are disparate outcomes. So there's a slight distinction between those two data books, but the main thing is each of them is tracking how kids and families are doing. We look at data in 4 separate areas. So you have data in economic well-being, education, health, and then there's a group of indicators called family and community that are also tracked.
All right, now can you kind of share with us a little bit about some advances that New Mexico has made? What are some things that caught your eye?
Absolutely. So, the big thing is the child poverty rate. So poverty is a really, really challenging indicator nationwide. And over the last decade, New Mexico has seen slow declines in our rate of child poverty. So it's not happening as quickly as we'd all like, but we are making forward progress. And the thing that's really, really exciting to say about that is the pandemic was really a perfect storm that should have caused spikes in child poverty. And New Mexico, along with some of the federal programs that came out during the pandemic, New Mexico's leaders really stepped in and made sure that we were providing the sorts of policies and resources to families to prevent poverty from getting worse. So we held steady in our poverty rate between 2021 and 2022. So for us, that's a big success. The other thing to say about that is that poverty rate, the particular data source for that doesn't even account for things like tax credits that are really well targeted to our families who are lower income, who are working. So for example, New Mexico's Working Families Tax Credit and our new state child tax credit, which families can claim for the first time this year. Those are both great poverty reducing credits that go to families that need it the most. And that's not even reflected in this particular measure of poverty. So that's one big success that we see in the data book. There's also some promising trends for our young people. So we're seeing a decrease in the teens that aren't in school and aren't working. That's back at its lowest point in the decade at 9%. So still higher than the rest of the nation, but moving in the right direction. And as well as our teen birth rate has declined 58% in the last decade.
Okay, now you mentioned some steps that lawmakers and policymakers have addressed in New Mexico. Can you kind of share some specifics on some things that have shown to have made a difference?
Yes, absolutely. So we know that our tax system has not been fair for a long time. The people who make the least money end up paying a higher percentage of their income in their taxes, while the wealthiest end up paying a much smaller share of their income than they're able to actually afford to help support the systems, the programs, the the things that we all take for granted every day, they can afford to pay more. So whenever the state looks at doing tax credits, when they present things like the working families tax credit and the state child tax credit that are targeted to families that are really accessible to our lowest income earners, that really makes a big difference in the money that they have in their pockets that they can turn around and spend on the basic needs for their families.
It's no secret to our audience that New Mexico is one of the poorest states in the country, poverty being a big issue for a lot of families in our state, in our region. What is it about poverty that really stood out the most to you and to where it's having such a burden on families across our state?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's really that poverty is so interconnected with all of the other areas of our lives with our families and having to do with child well-being. So, if a kid is in a family that's experiencing poverty and then they go to school and they maybe can't access good health care, they can't focus in class, they have much bigger problems to worry about. So that really can impact their ability to show up ready to learn in school, and that can just kind of snowball and lead into more effects related to intergenerational poverty and seeing those problems continue like that. There's also other issues of just our built environments and sort of structural problems related to race, related to policies that were passed historically to divide neighborhoods by who could live where. And so you see different resources being available to different communities as a result of these inequities that still exist in the system. And all of that kind of works together to make it very challenging for families to break out of that cycle of poverty. So it's really critical to provide targeted tax credits, to provide income supports like the SNAP program that helps alleviate some of the strain on food budgets and gets healthy food into those families. Things like Medicaid to provide preventative care and prevent a greater strain on the costs and the burden for our healthcare system. So all of those things kind of work together and make it really challenging to see big gains very quickly in the issue of poverty.
There's a lot of families that may be using SNAP or Medicaid in New Mexico, but I want to ask you, since you're somebody who spends so much time looking at data, are folks who may be eligible for SNAP or Medicaid actually taking advantage of this benefit?
Yeah, SNAP and Medicaid both have pretty great uptake. There's been a lot of work for that, and we're actually hoping to see during this legislative session, a full funding of the Medicaid budget in the state to make sure that families can still access these services, as well as some expansions to the SNAP program. So, for example, increasing the eligibility. So some of our working families that are still low income that don't quite qualify or who would kind of drop off of benefits before they could fully kind of meet that gap with a promotion or an increase in pay. These sorts of things will also help support families who are using it. But, I think there is, with all of these programs, there's always room to do better to make sure we are fully reaching all of the people that are eligible, to make sure that they know about these benefits, they know how to access them, they understand kind of what the requirements might be for those, and understand what the benefit looks like and how that can impact and assist their families.
What about the cost of housing and food costs? We've seen those rise, obviously, in New Mexico. Cities, communities, folks at the state level say they're trying to address that, but how big of a burden is that on families?
Yeah, absolutely. We are fortunate in New Mexico to have a lower housing cost burden than a lot of other states, but we also have higher poverty. So that is still a huge burden for people in the state. And fortunately, the legislature has really begun some really concerted and big efforts into making housing affordable. So they established the Housing Trust Fund. Last legislative session, the governor has really come out this session with a strong housing agenda. to help support exactly that, these rising costs that folks are experiencing. And the same is true with food. So, we are fortunate also to have universal school meals. So our kids that are in school don't have to worry about where their next meal is going to come from. But also, there is that issue of SNAP benefits aren't going as far for folks because the cost of food has gone up. And, kind of along with that, the food banks are serving more people than they ever have before. So it's really critical to see the legislature help fill some of those needs as well, to make sure that in the interim, before we have kind of balanced out a little more from the pandemic and seen some of those inflation issues kind of get alleviated, it's really important to see continued action on supporting all of these programs that can alleviate the costs of food, including food assistance through the food banks and any expansions or pilots in the SNAP program that the state is able to control.
What about having secure employment? New Mexico is obviously ranking pretty low in the country when it comes to having parents with secure employment. Jobs paying a livable wage, obviously another concern for a lot of folks.
Yeah. So we did see an increase in 2021 back up to 35% of our kids are in families where no parent has secure employment, and that's compared to 29% nationally. That is coming out of the pandemic. So in 2019, before we went into it, we had seen some decreases. We were down to 32%. That gap between us and the rest of the country was a lot smaller. So there's obviously still some recovery going on as far as employment goes. And we know that, folks are trying to figure that out. There is good evidence that more folks who receive income supports are working than the rest of the population, so those are the folks that are really trying to make ends meet. They're trying to get themselves and their families into a situation where things are going well. But in a lot of places in the state, there's often not those jobs available, not a job with a livable wage. And that's a big problem for the state.
I see. We just have a little over a minute left with you, but I want to talk with you about absenteeism in New Mexico. What is showing in this report, and how big of a concern should that be for folks?
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of the biggest challenges that we need to come up with solutions quickly for. Coming out of the pandemic last year we saw the chronic absenteeism rate at 40%. It just ticked down to 39% this year. So, that's still very, very high. To have 39% of our students missing 10 or more days of school is pretty significant. So, some of the policies that we support for that are those that address the needs of the students being served in the school. So we have a culturally and linguistically diverse group of students that we serve in New Mexico. And at the same time, many of them are experiencing a lot of barriers and external problems like poverty that are affecting their ability to succeed in school. And if school is not engaging to them, if it isn't relevant to their culture and their language.
You bring up some interesting points right there, Emily. Unfortunately, we're out of time with you. Emily Wildow, Senior Research and Policy Analyst and Kids Count Coordinator for New Mexico Voices for Children. Emily, again, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Having reliable and accessible transportation may be a challenge for many in our region. Whether it's a ride to work or being able to run daily errands, having a way to connect the communities in our area may be essential to the quality of life residents experience. Joining us now to talk about transportation is David Armijo. He is Executive Director with the South Central Regional Transit District. David, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Can you share with us first just what communities the district connects in Doña Ana County?
Well, no, we're a transit district, so we're regional. So we cover all of Doña Ana County. We connect into El Paso County with services and communities from Sunland Park, Santa Teresa, Chaparral, Anthony, and Las Cruces. And then we go all the way north to Hatch, and now we're beginning to extend to another county, Sierra County, which we hope to start new service up in May. And then we connect to services all the way to Otero County as well.
So you're covering the region.
Large service area.
Connecting communities. What's ridership numbers looking like right now?
Well, we started as a very simple system running only about 3 trips a day, 5 routes, and now we're up to 7 routes carrying over 100,000 trips last year. We're doing about almost 10,000 rides a month. So we've really continued to grow dramatically since the pandemic. Every year for the last 7-8 years, we've managed to grow ridership except for the year of the pandemic. So we're doing very well. We're constantly adding new services and attracting new grants to help pay for the services.
Attracting new grants, funding obviously key to keeping the transit district thriving.
That's correct.
What are some of the ways that this is really making an impact at the federal and state level?
Well, we're playing into a major national initiative that came out of the bipartisan infrastructure back in 2021, which is federal grants for electric buses. And so we created a zero emission plan that our board supported back in 2022. We received $5.58 million in grants from the federal government, then another $5 million of money from the congestion mitigation in the area around Sunland Park and the southern part of the district and in West Texas, El Paso. So over $10 million of grants is really going a long way, and it's going to allow us to begin to transition and to have clean burning buses, not just buses out there in the community.
You're also calling on the New Mexico legislature to assist with funding as well to help reach goals that you've set for the district. Can you share a little bit more about what you're looking for?
Yes, in order to meet the local match, which is about 10% because those are electric vehicles. If they were, it'd be 20% local match. So the federal government will pay 90%, and then we need 10%. So that means we need almost $1 million of local monies spread out over several years. We already picked up $300,000 from the legislature last year. We're asking for another $525,000 this year, and then we'll make up the rest of the local monies from the Doña Ana County and our membership fees to come to the $1 million that we need. So we're actually doing very well. The legislature is a major partner for us, our local delegation.
How essential is public transportation in our region for many of these communities, especially in the rural areas?
It's huge. So many people, especially in the southern part of Doña Ana County, but really all across Doña Ana County, all the way to Hatch or Sunland Park, we have a number of people who are somewhat impoverished. They don't have transportation, or maybe they only have one vehicle. So we become the family vehicle to get people to that first job, to neighboring communities, education, community college, or New Mexico State University, as well as to the hospital.
Las Cruces has taken steps to allow for free fares on the Roadrunner Transit in Las Cruces. What is the fare situation looking like in your district?
Yeah. We've just initiated free fares, and we'll do that for the next 6 months. We just started January 1st. We're going to program that in our budget. We'd like to do another year of that. We think there's enough funding to be able to do that. We believe this is a good opportunity to give something back to the community for those individuals who so need our services.
How do you feel that perspective has changed on public transportation in recent years?
You know, when we first started, there was some challenges about, do we need the bus? And I think what's happened is people have come out, they've talked to their legislative delegations, the different mayors and county supervisors and commissioners, and I think the message has got out there that, hey, we use the bus, we could use more service. And in fact, the next big move for us would probably be to launch weekend service. Most of our service is Monday to Friday. We have a couple of routes that are 7 days a week in the southern part of the service sector that goes into El Paso or Sunland Park. So we hope to expand that across the district so everybody has that opportunity to get around.
At the stops that are in our region, how are the stops needing upgrades in your opinion? I'd like to hear from you because we do live in an area that experiences some different weather.
Yes.
Especially in the summer when those triple-digit temperatures start to impact folks in our area. What are some things you would like to see?
So we did start a couple of years ago putting out some bus benches and shelters. We have over 275 stops, plus or minus, with about 45 stops with either some kind of a bench or shelter to it. Which doesn't sound too bad, but you know, if you don't have a bench or shelter, and it's 100-degree heat or it's wet and windy, you want that. So we're launching a massive program over the next 3 years to catch up and try to at least get beyond the 50% mark or even higher as we eventually get to the point of trying to have some form of amenity for all passengers at every stop.
How big of a role does the South Central Regional Transit District play in connecting all of our communities?
Well, the one thing that we look at is when you look at the city services like Las Cruces. Las Cruces runs about a 50 square miles out of a 250 square miles city, which is big, second largest city in the state. Our service area in Doña County is 3,800 square miles. We're currently doing 115 square miles of service. So our service is actually broader than that of Roadrunner, and will grow even further when we add another 45 miles going into Sierra County. So it's apples and oranges. They run a higher frequency of service. We try to connect everybody in a larger area. But I think the ability for people to make those decisions to go from point A to point B, and there's different marketplaces. In Sierra County, there are a lot more seniors, but they don't want to have to drive if they can get a bus. So we're trying to provide that service to them. And other areas, it's a different type of service. Higher frequencies down in Sumlin Park going into El Paso because people have jobs both ways, and that helps the economy and the community.
Where do you see the biggest need growing for your organization?
I think it's a combination of more service on the weekends, as I just outlined, later service into the evenings. We have a fairly short day that starts at 6:37 in the morning and runs to about the same time at night. That sounds like a lot, 12 hours, but really a lot of people want to go a couple hours longer. So being able to meet those needs. There are other areas in the service area that we're not yet going to. We look at the East Mesa here in Las Cruces. There's no service on the East Mesa. And so there's a lot of areas. There's no service to the airport. We have a municipal airport, and we don't have any bus service there.
Interesting. I'm sure there's going to be some good conversations happening around that, especially with folks trying to develop the airport and the other areas in our region. The biggest challenges facing public transportation right now, what are they?
Well, I think it's a combination. We mentioned it before, funding is always going to be an issue. But I think you also have to be able to be a good public servant. I think the public needs to know that we're doing a good job. We did win an award a year ago from the state, and that was because of the fact they found us to be the best growth in ridership, but also the most cost-effective. And I say that because cost-effectiveness is really important to be able to provide the service you have to do, but still be able to do it competitively in the marketplace is really critical, and it's not an easy thing to do.
Rural Transit System of the Year in New Mexico in 2022. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
On that. I kind of want to hear from you as well. When you're having these conversations with policymakers and folks who can really make a difference when it comes to the operating budget of the transit district, what are some of the things you share with them?
Well, right now, we developed in 2022 as well a zero emission bus plan. It's a fleet plan, and that's on our website. So if you go to the website, you'll find that information. Why is that important? It's important because we want to leverage those federal funds that we're able to get to do something that's going to have great value in the long term. We also want to be a leader in that. We want to partner with Roadrunner. They're doing the same thing here in Cruces. We think between our two agencies, as we expand upon that, we know the county of Doña Ana is working on that. They even have a station right in front of their building at the government center. More and more of this is coming. We want to help bridge the gap as we work our way through that process, and we want people to know, hey, we're trying to go forward in southern New Mexico to do something bigger and better than what maybe we would have thought we could have done.
Do you feel your organization is on the same page with the city of Las Cruces and the county?
Yes, I mean, they're partners with us. We derive revenue and funding. I'm laughing at this. I mean, it's part of a lifeline. I mean, we need one another. But we also know that we have staff. We're educating and training our staff. In fact, I've got some of my staff going out to be trained in about 2 weeks. As we get our training on these new electric chargers, Las Cruces is getting trained on that. I mean, we will then become the experts in the region for other businesses, private or public.
Is staffing one of the challenges you face?
Yes, I'm still laughing at this. We're in a unique position over that at Las Cruces because we hire people for service that goes to Hatch from Las Cruces. We hire service that's in Anthony in people who live out there or in Chaparral for that service. We also have service that goes in El Paso from Summerlin Park, and we have facilities in those Anthony and Summerlin Park. So we're able to hire people from a broader dynamic, and that's probably what's saving us in the marketplace, that we're able to have these opportunities where we can find people as well as train them to do the job.
I have under a minute left with you, but I just want to ask you, where would you like to see the transit district be in a decade?
I'd like it to get to the point where we're looked upon as a leader and a member of this community, and so that people are not just funding us, but they really recognize that when they travel the world, they go, hey, we have that in our hometown as well. We have the electric buses, we have the technology, and we have the ability to perform a really good service.
David Armijo is Executive Director of the South Central Regional Transit District. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we want to thank you for joining us. That's our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio every weekday. It's morning edition 5 to 9, fresh air at 11, followed by Here and Now noon to 2, and All Things Considered 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org. And we'd like to hear from you. You can always email us at feedback@nmsu.edu. For all of us at KRWG News, I'm Anthony Moreno. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.